Welcome, everybody. It's been a while. I have taken a little pause from these interviews because I really wanted to refocus and really look at what it is that I want to communicate in the sessions. So I'm really excited to be starting today with Daria Albers. Welcome, Daria.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So I know if you're listening, you are going to be wondering, who is Daria Albers? Who is this woman? Some of you may already know her, especially if you're in the field of MMA fighting and boxing. So Daria is a former professional kickboxer and world-class striking and mental performance coach to a variety of athletes, including championship MMA fighters and boxers all over the globe. So, as you can hear from her own background, she's taken that forward into her work. This bit really interests me as well, and we're going to come to that further in the talk. But Daria holds degrees in psychology and physical therapy, which she uses to further and deepen the athlete's understanding of how their minds and bodies are intrinsically linked in mindfulness and efficiency. She's dedicated her life to improving people's performances and well-being by freeing their warrior spirit, something we'll also come back to. And she's the founder of the MAP, the Mindful Athlete Program, a mindfulness-based approach to the work that she does, which really helps and is dedicated to improving this mind-body connection. So Daria, it's a real pleasure to have you. And
Thank you.
most people watch on YouTube. Some people listen on the podcast version, on the audio version, so they might not be able to see you. It doesn't matter. What I'd love right now is to hear a little bit about your very back story, like the
Mm.
young woman that was Daria. Like, how did you get into fighting? Because it's something that I kind of think, God, I'm frightened if somebody even
Uh,
looks like they're going to throw me a punch, you know?
yeah, and I think that it's such a crazy story. Not crazy, but such a not what people expect. So I went into fighting. I never planned it. I went into when I was little. My mom put me into soccer, but I liked the body contact. And then the coach said, like to my mom, maybe you should find something like judo for her, something where she can actually really grab people and wrestle with them. I loved it, and so my mom put me into judo, and then I was also horse riding for a long time because I grew up on a village, and yeah, I loved this, but there was something. I was actually a very quiet child and very insecure, and I didn't connect well to my peers. I was a completely outsider. They didn't like me too much. I didn't like them too much. That was my whole school history. Um, and then I just one day I met someone who was into kickboxing, and they just said, okay, maybe you should come to kickboxing. And honestly, the first year I cried after every sparring, every hard training. I was not made for this. I was like, why?
Ah, so you weren't crying that you'd found the thing that you wanted
No,
to do.
no, it was so tough. But somehow, see, that's the weird thing. I sticked around, and I think still that there's something deeper in us, right, than the superficial narrative, right? Something deeper in me knew that that's the right thing to do.
Right.
And although I had such trouble, I wasn't very talented. I was a little bit overweight, right? I was definitely not in my warrior spirit. I thought it's all about being tough, 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 and I wasn't tough, right? And I didn't understand myself, and I struggled so much for the first year, almost like 2 years, the first, and then. But after a while, right, I got those glimpses of like, oh, okay, overcoming your fears, overcoming those weaknesses, and I got deeper, deeper into it, right? And that's already almost, wow, I'm 40, so that's 25 or more years ago,
I
right?
was going to ask what age you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Okay.
Was yeah, so around 15, 14, 15, I had my first yeah, I wasn't judo before, but like went in and out, and then I really went into it when I was 15, 16. Then I started really training, and then I started doing the first fights, and yeah, I went really deeply into this then, and with every year I was deeper immersed in this process, and I could understand so much about myself. And yeah, now I mean my whole life, it's so interesting. This sport built me. This is who I am. It built me so much.
Right.
So yeah.
Wow. Oh, I mean, there's so much in what you've shared already, but I'd really like to dig into that a little bit more. I got goosebumps actually when you said this sport built me, because it's kind of like so often we take a different approach. We're kind of doing something and we're aiming for the performance
Yeah.
based aspect of that to get
Yeah.
better and better and better, and then we're ignoring the kind of human being underneath.
Yes.
So tell us more about where were you living, by the way, when all this was happening?
I grew up in Germany, and in the Netherlands, there the kickboxers were at that time were the best country for kickboxing. And I grew
Okay.
up in Hamburg, so it was 4 hours drive, and we drove every weekend for Friday, Saturday, Sundays. After school, immediately we drove there with the whole team. We trained, so I went on off between Germany and the Netherlands. And then when I grew up more, I was older. I drove myself, and I did my camps there. When I turned professional, most of the fights I did in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Is that where you are now?
No, I'm in Poland right now.
Okay, okay.
I live in Poland.
Yeah, so this story then I mean, there's like a million little, kind of pathways that we could follow, because I'm also curious with your mum being smart enough to recognize something in you, put you in football, and then the coach saying she needs something different and her responding to that like, well, hats off, mum.
Yeah.
Um, what's been her response to the following of your journey? Is she still with you?
My mom is my biggest supporter.
Oh.
My mom is my best friend with my other best friend. I have two best friends, two souls. And my mom was, you know what is interesting? Let's have a real talk here. What is interesting, my mom wasn't always like she is now. Now she's my best conversation partner. She's my best friend. We're completely authentic with each other. We support each other. We grew through each other. But my mom wasn't like this. She was quite stressed about it. She was, she was had her own life. My dad is not alive anymore, but they were together and they had a very intense relationship. And they were very busy also with their own relationship, with their own lives, with businesses, building it. So my mom, she always supported me, but which is an interesting thing is me through the growth I've done to the sport, I inspired my mom a lot for change. And that is something which is now we read the same books, we meditate, we do breath work together, we do yoga together. She comes on the mat. She was almost to all of my fights. She was with me when I coach my fighters now when she can, not for the UFC, not for the big fights, but for the smaller fights. She comes. She even comes, joins the locker room, right? She watches the hands taping. She's really supportive, and it is so interesting how the sport grew me so much, right? And I evolved into that Daria I am because of the sport and of this experience, and how somehow we think counterintuitive it is, right? That I inspired my mom. Not my mom inspired me in a way that she wasn't behind me. She never said you can't do it. She always said if the education is right, like if you're good, if school is right, if you do everything how I like to do education based, then you can go whatever you do. You want to fight, then fight. Although it was very stressful, but along our relationship, that sport actually built me, my mom, my fighters. Right? That it's true martial arts, right? The martial arts is the essence of life. People people sometimes don't understand it, right? We all warriors, and warrior spirit and martial arts is part of human history.
Mm,
It
mm.
is part of our legacies of the history of the humankind, right? There always were warriors and martial artists, and so this is such a deep thing to go on this journey if you really open up and if you really face your fears, and you can inspire your whole community with that. And I think that that's what I do. And that I brought to someone lately said in the UFC that I brought the martial arts spirit back into MMA, which is
Wow.
it's a tough sport. It's about business also, but we need to bring back that martial arts spirit because that's what it was built on.
Yeah, and that's going to lead us back to that question about the performance versus purpose, I think. But I love hearing this as well. I mean, I'm constantly inspired by my own children to be a better human, just by them being themselves. But then there is that reciprocity of how they've been brought up and the qualities that they've embodied that now become theirs. So it's this learning all the time. And oh, excuse me, and there are so many ways that we can be warrior spirits in our lives. But I think it's like bringing it into intentional awareness that really makes a difference in terms of that kind of practices and the things that it takes. So let's go back to that piece now about the performance to purpose. What do you see? Is there a moment when you see people that you're working with kind of starting to really go, oh, yeah, I get it? Do they typically come to you in the performance metrics aspect of it and then suddenly flip?
Yeah, that's actually it, right? So my work, yeah, it's of course very different things you do, but one of those things is identity. Right? I talk a lot with my athletes about identity because as an athlete, but also look, our whole world is all performance based. It's all about performance metrics, right?
Yeah,
Where you identify with where you work, with who you work, who you are, what you do, how you do constantly. It's all about performance. And obviously, that's a slippery slope because, right, when performance is great, you feel great. When performance is bad, obviously, you feel bad, right? That's why we get crazy about it. And identity work is a big part because, especially in the sport of MMA, because when you're a fighter, right, you or an athlete, right? How many people say when you ask them, "Who are you?" I'm an athlete. Yeah, it's good, but it's also tricky because it's a very, very narrow identity you build yourself. And
mm,
especially when you say you're a fighter, and that's all you build your identity with, not the daughter, not the friend, right? Not, I don't know, the dog lover, whoever, right? You, it's a very small of you, right? A small part of you you're identifying with, right? There's so much more, right?
yeah,
And you limit yourself.
yeah.
And again, it is also painful if things don't go good. And that's the problem with fighters. So when you performance based, you go into a fight, into the performance, of course, the biggest fear is for failure. Right? That's why we get into perfectionism. We all know that, right? Perfectionism is not nothing that great. It's just the fear, right? It's the fear, it's the control you want to have.
Yeah.
If you if you have fear of failure, you have fear that your identity will be questioned, you will never get out of your comfort zone, right? So you limit your performance already by being identified with it.
Yeah.
Right? It is so self-limiting and it's so stressful, and a lot of athletes suffer under it. Right? They
Mm,
really mentally suffer under it because everything is about how you've done, and we just remember our last performance. So if it's good, it's great. If it's not good, it's shit. And that is there, they get anxious, very, very anxious, right? They get depressed even if it's for a long career. Now, to keep going in our life in a long career, you will have to shift from performance based to purpose based, right? Building on your core values, building on something that gives you purpose and meaning, right? To focus, coming back to mindfulness, right? It's all about mindfulness that helps me so much. Mindfulness based cognitive therapy, but also mindfulness based stress reduction techniques. I did both, so I use both. So to bring that human into the process, right, into the present moment, that is so important to live, right, to be self-aware, to be in tune with mind, body, spirit. It is the key, right? That's, of course, it's also attention training. There's a lot of other benefits about the mindfulness aspect, but that is, yeah, one of my main works, and you can see it. And that's what people sometimes they call me the horse whisperer of MMA because they're like, you get those big guys, right? They're tough, and they seem so sometimes so rigid. And then they're like, after a few months, you see them coming to the interviews and coming to the fights, and they're like really confident, calm, collected, like regulated. And they're like, what are you doing to them? Well, like, I shift actually just a little bit of their identity, right? They step into the purpose, they understand that they want to be in the process. And that
mm.
is so liberating. You know that, right? When we're in the process, when we're in our purpose, we have infinite energy,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? It is so powerful.
Which fighters do you see out there at the moment that you recognize are understanding that, would you say, from your experience?
Um, Usyk, Lomachenko, Anthony Joshua lately, definitely did lots of work on himself, and you could see it. Um, Sean O'Malley, he's in the UFC. Someone who also, Kamaru Usman is also someone in the UFC who did, yeah, amazing human being. Who comes to my mind? Are there many of them? Also many, yeah.
Yeah.
Mahmed Khalidov, he's a Chechenian fighter here from Poland. He did also, being 43 years old, did an incredible transition with our work. Also that,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really interesting because we were talking about Stephen Bartlett and that I'd just been to his talk in Manchester last week where he mentioned Lomachenko, but something else that he mentioned, we'll come to Lomachenko and how that links into your bio in a moment, but he spoke about the poison of the peak so that we can keep on working and working and working and developing our skills and our strengths. And then we get to this
Mhm.
peak of our performance. And then when we are so overly identified with that, we have no idea what to do
Yeah.
when that starts to shift or change, or somebody else is coming in, rising to the peak of their capacity. So, and I've experienced that myself, where I've made my identity. I used to run juice bars and clean food cafes, and so everybody knew me for that. And it's different but the same. It was like when I lost those businesses, I didn't know who I was because I
Yeah.
was so identified with that. And
Yeah.
so then for me, and I'm sure for you, then we have to switch to, well, why was I doing that? What were my values? Like, how do I align who I am and what I do now and
Yeah.
represent myself? And I don't think for me, I ever tried to shift into breath work. It was part of the natural evolution of my process. But what I loved that Stephen also shared was this story about Lomachenko, who you just named, that developing something within ourselves, which I guess points to the things that we are interested in, or in his case, he wasn't, it was his dad that took him out of boxing as a young boy and put him into dance
Yeah.
classes
Yeah.
so that he could really move in a certain way. And he may not be the top fighter in the world. I don't know. This is your world and your arena, but he's got something there that comes from that distinction. Like, how do you see the relevance of that in your work, and how does it tie into what we've been talking about when people bring in these other aspects of themselves?
I mean, first you have to say Lomachenko is one of the most gifted boxers we have, right? So he turned out to be one of the top professionals in our sport. I'm absolutely fangirl of this this guy, but also, yeah, also of course of my own fighters. I think that we, in general, we get fixated, right? That's what we do in our lives, right? We think, and it's actually sometimes hard because to be a specialist in something, right, you have to be going really down that road, and to be specialized in one thing, there's already so much knowledge, so much the things you need to experience and learn and try and do, that you just, yeah, you have to narrow your mind for a while at least, right, to get in the knowledge. But then, mm, I always talk about to my fighters about the unit. There's some universal rules about life, and certain things you will understand. And it doesn't matter if you're a top level mental performance coach or boxing coach, or I always say the best cook in the world. There's some philosophies you will understand, right? And one of them is obviously the beginner's mind, right? An open mind, right? That is something to approach. Of course, there's time where we have to dedicate a really focused awareness to something. But once you get to know your field, right, then you need to open up again,
Yeah.
and opening up your, yeah, the learner's mind, your creativity, and then you will start seeing that you understand systems, right? For example, Lomachenko with the dancing, right? Everybody who knows boxing, I know exactly that this is such a genius move to do so, because the rhythm, the footwork, the foot hand coordination, or the body coordination in general, right? That is something really, really embodiment,
Yeah.
interoception, also feeling really the inner perception of your body. This is the base of boxing.
Mm.
Beautiful, right? The moves, everything you've done, it was such a smart move in general. Usyk and Lomachenko, both of them, they have a very good mental performance coach, and they work forever. He was, I think, actually one of the first who work with them, and they have an incredible capacity for focus, attention, and mindfulness, for emotional regulation, for the strong body and mind connection. You can see it because they're very, very particular in movements, reaction time, precision. That's what they're known for.
Mm.
And that comes from the mental states also. Obviously, if you don't have skills in your body, that won't happen. But the connection in them, they're very strong on this. It's beautiful. It's art. It's art when you see them, right? When you know the sport, those are the fighters where my heart of a coach is just like, wow, I sometimes want to cry because I get so emotional about the beauty.
Yeah, and that is that warrior spirit again, isn't it? You know, if you think back to the famous martial artists or the famous warriors of all time and you know what made them stand out and what makes us stand out as human beings. And I think to have that capacity and that interoception you talked about, that awareness is so, so important. It's the essence of my work as well,
Yeah.
because there's a gazillion people out there offering breath work, and
Mhm.
there's a gazillion people out there offering these different forms of somatic practices and embodiment work. But when you really are in connection with somebody that you know understands that, when we teach it, we're talking about the quality of presence, which is the
Yeah.
same thing, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's the capacity to be able to self-regulate, stay in the moment,
Right.
bring things back,
Right.
feel and respond, feel,
Right. Right.
respond.
Right.
Yeah, not
Okay.
think and do.
And but that's it, right? Martial artists did that, right? A lot. Most of martial arts training in the past was mental training and mind-body connection training, right? If, of course, you have to learn to fight, right? If you don't know how to fight, that will also not help you. It will help you in your individual, right? In your individual evolution and growth, but it won't help you in the fight, right? So obviously, that's why I'm also a skill coach. So I'm a striking coach also, and mental performance. I do both, and I love that because I can bring it together, right? I can see, okay, here you need more really skill training, and here you need more mental training, and here we can bring it together. And mental training was such a important part of every martial artist, right? Real warrior spirit. Like everybody who fights knows that 70-80% of your performance is the mind. The rest skills. You can be actually skills wise just an average fighter, but if your mind is right, if you, as we always say, calm, collected, focused, right? If you're emotionally regulated, if you have the skill of attention really trained, uh, then you can bring also team spirit, because that's also another thing that is very, very important, right? When you are someone who's like embedded, good and healthy, you have a healthy team spirit, then you can, an average fighter can be at the very top, actually.
That's interesting. So what you're saying there is that in that sense of being held by community, by a team,
Absolutely.
that will really build somebody's
Yeah.
sense of their skill set in a
Yeah,
way.
because look, a lot of people don't understand in psychology how important relationships are for our
Yeah.
brain, bodies, and nervous systems, right? And we know that because we work with that. Relationships. So I can teach you attention, I can teach you mindfulness. Of course, I can teach you the skills how to choke someone, knock someone out. Okay. But if you feel you don't belong, if you feel you have no backup, if you don't feel loved, if you
Mm.
don't feel someone's like really going in there and they have your back when the cage is closing, when you're alone, and it can be a very lonely place when a cage is closing and you see on the other side someone who really wants to kill you, right? They come for you and you can see it in their body, in their face, right? If you feel you don't have a team who backs you up, that is very tough to do. So you can have the mental skills, you can have the physical skills, very good already if you have that. But if you don't have the backup, that's from the team, right? When if you don't have really deep, you're not embedded, as I always say, in deep relationships in your team, it's very tough to function. And what people some don't understand also, and I think that is also, of course, I'm well educated, I have good techniques, I'm very long in my sport, but I have this ability to build good relationships with people because I love human connection.
Yeah.
thrive, and I was just talking with my mentors today about this morning at supervision. I love when people thrive. It gives me life energy, right?
Mm,
Relationships are for me the most important in my life. And
mm,
this is one of my superpowers, that I can build those relationships with the people. And that's how I make, or the people, the athletes, the other humans. And that's why I can move them sometimes from dark places to really light places. And that's what people at least say also, that they change my athletes, because usually I get the little tricky athletes. They find me. I don't know how it is, right? It's usually the ones where everybody's like, wow, good luck working with this guy, right? But the horse whisperer. And it's, of course, it's my skills, and of course it's that I love the sport, but it's also that I love people, and I
mm.
love building true, real, authentic relationships with people. And yeah, that's very, very important aspect.
Yeah, we're very similar in that. I'm really enjoying listening to the synchronicities and the similarities because community building is huge for me.
Yeah.
And that sense of wanting all of my team, like say on our current breathwork training, wanting the team to thrive. And how do we do that? We respect, we listen, we give gentle kind of nudges and reflections back.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to receive them too, of course.
Right.
But we
Exactly.
create this sense of the circle. I also love that you mentioned a while back the beginner's mind, because I had a big smile when you said it, because my shamanic teacher taught us that years ago, always approach everything from a beginner's mind. Be
Yeah. Yeah.
humble, be
Yeah.
humble enough to, we don't know what we don't know. And
Yes,
so to be
absolutely.
able to go like, sometimes I see it with students coming in who've got existing skill bases, and there's a kind of like,
Yeah.
show
That's
me what you've got. And then you have to like slowly like go, hey, I really respect those skill bases you've got. Maybe you could share those with other people who don't have that, because they might have something that they can bring to you. And maybe that's me, and maybe that's somebody else.
absolutely. And I think honestly, this is how would you say that in English? But that's a difference between performing and mastery, performance and mastery. Right? When you always perform, you're good, right? You perform, you're a good coach, you're a good athlete. But mastery is so connected to this, to this beginner's mind, to the open-mindedness, to being humble, to being also present in this non-judgmental awareness, just to be with whatever happens.
Yeah, yeah,
It has, that's such a different level, and you can see that. You can see if someone has truly mastered something, or if someone is still performing. You can feel that immediately in
yeah,
coaches, in athlete, in us, right? Probably in some parts of our lives we're also there,
yeah.
right? We go in and out, and sometimes I feel I mastered something, and then sometimes I feel like, yeah, okay, I'm back to performing. So it's, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think, there's a difference between mastery and aloofness. So it's kind of almost like when there's nothing to prove, and when we have developed that sense of like open presence, we know how to conserve our energy. We know how to be generous with our energy, and we also know when we need to like pull back or do our own inner work.
yeah, and look, that brings us back to identity, right?
Right.
If you are so fixated on performance-based identity, right, you're so scared, right? You will sabotage yourself to not go out of the comfort zone, right? Because you judge yourself, you feel other people are judging you, you're afraid of this. And I was talking lately, I think even on my Instagram, about vulnerability,
Oh yeah.
how important it is to share. And that is one thing, you know what, at the beginning of my career, now obviously I back up my work with facts, right? I'm one of the best in the world. So people are a little bit more open to me. But at the beginning of my work, they told me, you're too emotionally in this, you're too vulnerable, you're too authentic. I heard that so many times.
Really?
It was a moment where I thought, like, yeah, maybe I should be rather a professional, right? In psychology and typical psychotherapy sessions, you would do it different, right? But it's a whole different job than what
Yeah.
I'm doing. I'm a coach, right? I'm a mental performance coach. I'm on the field, right? I need this connection. And most of my fighters, actually, like the top level guys, I heard that, I don't know how many times I heard that, they were like, you know why I started trusting you? I'm like, why is that? I think about my skills. I don't know, because they're like, because I can see your sensitivity. I can feel that you're so authentically and vulnerable, and you show that. So I tell them, for example, when I have a bad day, I tell them, they see either way, right? I don't hide it. I tell them, like, guys, today please don't talk shit because I have a bad day, right? I'm not always emotionally regulated, so just do your work and then we go home, we see each other tomorrow. And I show them that I had a fight last year where we walked out 60,000 people, 63,000 people. It was a huge event, the biggest event in Poland, national stadium, with the icon of Poland, Mehmet Khalidov. He is the most known fighter, one of the most known fighters ever Poland had produced. And I walked out with him and I said to him that, like, a few hours before the fight, I was quite tense. I was like, wow, that's a Polish icon. People in Poland are not always very open to mental performance, to that aspect of MMA. And the strong Chechenian man, and all of a sudden he has this Daria Albers, the mental performance coach, in his corner. And there was a lot of pressure. And I told him, even before, he's like, "You're a little tense." I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm tense, definitely, but let me work through it." And I did. And then when we went to the venue, it was actually such a great moment. We walked out and you met, over 60,000 people, right? And it was dark and they had those lights on and it was a huge show. And I look at him and I'm like, "You ready?" And he looked at me with his dark eyes. He's like, "Are you ready?" And we're like, "Yeah." And it was one of the best moments of my career, the moment when I looked at him, right? Again, the relationship,
Mm.
right? Being like, yes, maybe 3 hours ago I didn't feel 100% ready, but I
Yeah.
worked through it. And I show you, as the leader, as the coach, I show you how to work through it, and we work through it together. And then we peak in the moment and we walk out there, and he did, having 43 years old, the best performance of his life. I mean, a lot. I was like, after this, I was passed out. All the stress.
Yeah, everything I've been holding here. What I mean, I when I listen to that, I hear that moment of the edge, and I love the honesty of, like you say, it would have been seen anyway. So okay, let me work through it. And we
Yeah.
haven't got long, we're going out there soon. How did you work through it? What was your process?
So I take time for myself. So if I can, let's say we're not in the locker room yet, so it was before in a hotel. So I take time. I just go to my room and obviously, I do some breath work. Of course, I anchor myself in the breath, but I love all kinds of interoception or body scan practices where I
Yeah,
tune really into the body. But also I journal a lot.
mm,
So I sometimes write down. There's a little. Actually, it's funny. My mom has that on her fridge. I wrote down a little, like, in the hotel on the bed, lying. I think, I don't know how, 5 6 years ago. There's a date on this, and like in this little piece of paper, I said, "I am the best mental performance coach in the world. My fighters love me. They trust in me, and together we own the world." And those little things, right? Those reminders,
yeah,
those affirmations, those anchors are so important.
yeah,
But you cannot even look, you can do breath work, but when your mind wandering and you do it, it will not help. You can do a body scan, but if you're not really into it, it won't help, right? So you have to, right? You have to take time for moments with yourself,
yeah.
even if it's uncomfortable sometimes, right? And it is so important, right? Because obviously all of the techniques are great, but you have to be starting to embodying them, right? And that's a process of
Mm,
awareness training, introspection,
mm,
observing yourself, right? Observing yourself in stressful and less stressful environments, and so on. So at the end, when I'm kind of stressed or tense, I know what to do, if it's the body scans, or if it's the breath work, or if it's journaling, or even self-talk, because I
yeah.
worked through it. I embodied it already earlier. So it's just a little reminder, a little anchor.
Mm.
Okay, this is it. And it shifts. My physiology shifts. I can see, okay, I'm good. The tension goes away, and then I'm ready for the game.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize that to people listening because I speak about this, where it's the cultivation of our practices. So, sometimes I think we live in a society where we expect to be rescued and
Right,
fixed and healed
right.
and somebody else to do the work, and it isn't going to work. And so it's like always got to come, and it's slog, it's hard work, it's discipline, and that's the warrior spirit. You don't
That's
get a warrior spirit
right,
without
right,
some discipline
right,
involved. Used to be my
right.
least favorite word. I hated the word discipline because I used to find it confronted my sense of freedom.
Mm.
And
Mm.
there's a woman called Gabrielle Roth, who's the founder of Five Rhythms Dance Practice, who says that
Mm.
it takes great discipline to be a free spirit. And I love that quote. Really
Oh,
love it. Yeah.
yes,
Because to find the freedom on the other
yes,
side, we have to put the work in.
exactly, exactly that. Oh, this is so beautiful. It's exactly it, right? It has to become a lifestyle, right? All the practices we do, you have to internalize them, right? You have to really, and that's just with discipline and work. And I tell my fighters that they're like, okay, they call me sometimes. They call me, UFC calls me, they're like, we have this fighter. We have 6 weeks. He's in a really bad state. He needs to go out and he has to fight someone on the top. And I'm like, whoa, okay, it's just 6 weeks. Why not the 6 days, guys? Because I'm a magician, right? So this is tough, and I tell them, okay. Now they think that a lot of sports psychologists, but also mental performance coaches, work a little bit like this. They have very fixed sessions, and then people show up to the sessions. But if you want to move someone like on the highest level, right, in the toughest sport, or one of the toughest sports in the world, right, you have to really, if you have a short time, you have to work very intensely and deeply with them. And I tell them, like, okay, now you have all kinds of skill training, you have strength training, you have regeneration, and you have mental training, right? It's another session we're adding into your daily plan. And that's why I take a lot of time to make them understand and feel it, because I want them to internalize it, right? I don't want to use mental performance as a technique, just a means to, right, get somewhere. It's like, no, it's about the internal work, right? It is something that needs to be an integral part of who you are, right? It's a mindset shift. And
I feel like you're teaching people to be so much more than a fighter when
yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. And but that's what a coach does, right? That's why I always say, okay, when people ask me, how do you want to? I'm a psychologist, a striking coach. I'm a coach, right? That's the difference. What we say about a trainer and a coach,
Right.
right? A coach has, of course, the skills, but you coach them mentally, right? You instill the philosophy, the energy. You take responsibility for them. They take also partly a responsibility for you, right? For like you all of together, you build a dream, right? And that's what a coach does, right? That's such a big difference between, okay, I train you, I show you the skills, right? That's not who I am. I'm a coach by life, and that's why I'm working, as you know, a lot, and I'm constantly busy, and I'm sometimes really tired of it, but that's my purpose. And that is extremely important to, if you want to look, if you want to do something in your life, you want to inspire people to be better people, to be like, to, better people is so maybe not even the right word. To, I want to give people techniques, tools, knowledge, wisdom, however you want to put, so they can be free, right? And I don't want them to be even dependent on me. I want to inspire them to shift maybe things, to let them on the way, and then I can see they're better husbands. I'm saying husband, probably wives too, but I have mainly male clients in MMA, right? But I can see it. Even the wives, sometimes they call me, they're like, hey, when did you talk the last time to my husband? I'm like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. You should talk to him. I'm like, okay, no problem, right? But there's so much impact you can have. All right, they're getting better parents, friends. Uh,
Hmm.
they're building the businesses.
Mm.
There's so much input you can give people, and I love this. But that's what a coach does.
Wow, I mean, I'm just so loving this conversation and so loving hearing, all of these distinctions that I think ripple across every aspect of life, because when we talk about purpose, and you said just now, being the coach and building that team and helping people thrive is your purpose. when did you stop fighting, and was your purpose clear at that point, how you'd make that transition?
You know, I have a it's actually also an interesting story about it. I stopped fighting around 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I don't fight just today I actually posted a photo of my, I think actually it was my last fight. And so when I was a fighter, I had a lot of injuries because my body not necessarily was an athlete's body. Now my body is interesting. My body with 40 now is much stronger, much more made for this than it was. But it's because of practice and I built it and I put a lot of time into regeneration and I understood mind body connection. Obviously, back then as a fighter, I didn't understand all of this. So I had a lot of injuries, and because of this, my coach was like, "Okay, you can teach, you can to keep the fighter busy, right? You want to be on the mat, although you can't train." And there's one very actually, he's one of the best coaches in MMA, and it's funny because we're starting now fighting each other, right? So we compete with each other because my guys are on the top level, his guys on the top level, and he told me many years ago when I was still a fighter under him and trained with him, he told me, you know what, Daria? I know you're very good, skilled. You're a very hard worker, very disciplined, but you will be an amazing coach. And that's 15, 17 years ago. And we just recently, I told him, like, you remember when you told me that? And he's like, because he looked at my guys, we train sometimes together in the camps. They're like, you guys are good. Like, I
Hey!
know, I'm coming for you. It is so but that's those amazing relationships. You don't know when you tell someone something how it will inspire him and unfold the whole life unfold. I
Mm,
never forgot what he said, and he gave me this little kick, and that's how my whole career evolved, right? I thought first, that's why I studied physical therapy, everything is the body. Then I thought, okay, everything is psychology. And then later you understand, okay, meaning, purpose, spirituality is also equally important, right? And that
mhm.
brings, without even ever planned, it brought me through body, mind, and spirit, right? Which we all know that's when we are whole, when we're healthy in body and mind and spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't wish better for my life to unfold.
Uh, I'm really happy to hear that. It's exciting and it's inspiring. I've got a question. Maybe it's a question that we'll move towards ending on, but do you see any significant differences between male and female fighters in terms of that warrior spirit and mindset and everything, or do you see that gender has no relevance?
No, actually, maybe it's hard to say for me because I don't work on an amateur level where they're still building, right, their identities and their skills. I usually work with the top level athletes, and there's no difference. They work very disciplined. They know. Sometimes I would say that women are a little bit more disciplined, right? I do not have to have an eye on them constantly, right? To be like you give them the plan and they do it. But because of this, sometimes they lack the easiness, right? That easygoing feeling. So
Mm.
that is one of I can say for my sport, obviously, I can't tell for other sports, but that is something I see that sometimes women are so perfect, disciplined, right? Everything is great. So they're easy to coach, but then sometimes they lack and in fighting you need that sometimes to be loose, to be like to say like, okay, F it, I go for it. And the guys have that a little bit more.
Yeah, I see
That
that in my relationships actually. That's really interesting.
yeah, yeah.
Especially as a woman who's, I have perfectionist tendencies. I'm quite driven. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you are too. I can hear
Sure.
that. So listen, what's next for you in your work? Like, are you just, not just, but are you really happy and fulfilled doing exactly what you're doing now? Do you have visions to change anything or bring anything else in?
It's interesting that you're asking that because I feel there's a transitioning happening in my life. Like, obviously, to be where I am, I had to be super focused on sports, right? To be on the top level in MMA, you have to be quite concentrated on the sport. But I feel now with 40 that I want to bring all of those skills to the people in the world. And I do more and more projects. So I'm starting different projects, how to teach what I know, what can move fighters from really dark spaces into the light. I want to teach the same thing for the world because we need that, right? We need more mental skills, more psychological skill training, but backed up with relationships, with community, and with love. And this is what I'm standing for. And I think that is what I want to bring into the world. So I want to connect to people like you. I want to show up on more podcasts. I want to inspire people to do something, have talks, create more courses, because I think that's my direction to go.
Wow, I mean, you utterly are inspiring. And as you said that, I just suddenly went, oh my God, imagine I can get you onto our breathwork training talking to the students about that kind of quality of mindset and discipline that you're talking about that I think is so missing sometimes in, I finished my training, what do I do now? I don't think I'm good enough. I'm not sure that I want that visibility, or I don't know how to get it, or I'm scared of it, blah, 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 blah. So I don't think this is the last conversation that we'll have.
Good. That's good.
Um, yeah, and for somebody who might be kind of going, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know much about MMA and I don't know much about this fighting, where's the best place for them to start just being curious and open and interested?
You, you mean about the sport of MMA?
Yeah, the sport, to watch it, to learn, or to
I think, which is really interesting. So the UFC is the biggest organization in MMA. Now, and they do something. It's called UFC Embedded, and you can find it on YouTube. So it's the behind the scenes,
ah,
and they do really interesting documentaries about the fighters, and you can see like once you start watching it, it's people say, wow, I never thought they are like this, those fighters, right? You can really get a peek into their lives, how they live, how they train, about the relationships they have in their families and coaches, and not just the training, right? So it's one thing is you watch a fight and you're like, wow, this is a badass, right? Wow. But then when you see the same badass in the cage and being like so loving to the family, and they laugh with the teams and they talk about the pains and the fears. And so behind the scenes in the UFC, I think it's in general, I think it's good to start following fighters.
mm,
Uh, People are also very, very not people in our sport. We know that it is like this, but many people I show my fighters, that so they start following my fighters on Instagram. They're like, wow, they're really philosophical. They really have so much to say. And yeah, because we're martial artists, there's
yeah,
a lot of quality, a lot of things you can get out for your life from martial arts. And obviously, I always tell people go on the mat, find the gym, and start, for example, training BJJ, which is part of MMA. It's a
yeah.
beautiful sport. It's a very smart sport. Take a boxing class, right? Just go to be part of the community, especially for women. That's what I want to add also. I think everybody should know a little bit how to fight. It's
Mm.
really healthy because it makes us strong, it makes us confident, and it's part of our soul, right? Not just to be peaceful, not just to be regulated, also how to fight. It has to be balanced.
The nervous system aspects, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. And you have to be comfortable in both. You're
Mm.
in fight spirit, okay, you're good. You're in peace, you're good, right? You approach life as a whole. And I think also finding your way to the gym is also good.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. I mean, please, in the links and everything, drop some information about where we can find your fighters and see more of your work. And where can people find you? What's the best place?
I think the best place is my Instagram, Daria Albers. There's just one. But also I have a website, dariaalbers.com. If people are interested with, you can fill out a few things and then we will get back to you when you're interested in work or in the course. Then yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this really enriching conversation. It's opened up a lot of doorways for me, and it's a really beautiful conversation to have on this day, which is the day of the solar eclipse, which according to shamanic traditions is a time where we go within and we renew our commitments and promises to our life purpose and what we're here for. So it's really
Wow.
beautiful. Yeah, really beautiful timing to have that kind of like mindset stuff coming in today. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.